Let's jump in here and read a few verses, picking up where we left off, of course, right here in verse 8. It says, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? And then you would endanger my head before the king." Now, let's just be reminded of this, what's happened here. King of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, has gone to Jerusalem in 606 to besiege the city. So that was a multi-year campaign. That's the way it would work until they ran out of resources. And so officially in 597 BC, he has success in going into Jerusalem and capturing it and deporting a bunch of people. A group of those people would be Daniel and his friends. That's known as the first deportation. 10 years later, he decides to go back again and clean up a lot more people, and that's called the second deportation. That's when Ezekiel and some others will be captured as well. And we have those prophets written in the Bible that parallel Daniel's experience. But the reason I bring that up this morning as a reminder and why it's important is because Babylon did something unique in history, unlike other nations that dominated other cultures. And that was other cultures would strike fear and terror and terrorize people, mutilate people, kill them, all these kinds of things. And sure, Babylon did that, but not to the extent that was done in the past. And what they decided to do, something far more effective than just killing off their enemies, you know what they did? They amalgamated them into their society. They taught them the ways of Babylon. We talked about that last week. They taught them the ways of Babylon, introduced them to their practices and cultures and gods. And what they did is they found the cream of the crop like Daniel, these really smart Ivy League kind of guys, and they amalgamated them into their culture so that they could utilize them in their own way. And we talked about all that indoctrination and everything last week. But the interesting thing about Daniel, and the best we can tell, he has been, like the rest of them, he's been made a eunuch. So they've castrated him. So think about it. He's been pulled away from his family. Everything he knew and loved nationally is broken, burned, and destroyed. And he's been removed far away from that land, and he's even been emasculated. You put all that together, and you think that would be something that would cause any one of us to be incredibly bitter, discouraged, and disheartened at the least. And yet, the only line in the sand that Daniel draws is right here in verse 8. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's delicacies. There was, like he said, you can take my house, you can take my family, you can take my manhood, but you will not take my consecration to God. And that's an awesome line for every one of us to draw. In fact, it was a Holocaust survivor who said he learned something very important in being in a concentration camp. He said, I realize that every freedom in life can be taken from you, but the freedom of thought. Only you and I have the ability to control that. No one can take that from you and I. That's the one freedom that we will always have in our possession. And Daniel did that himself. He said, everything has and can be taken away. This is something I will not let be taken away from me. And I will not defile myself with the king's food. Now, we're going to look a lot into this morning and consider it, but understand where Daniel's coming from. That as he would go into there, and again, all the pomp and circumstance that would be surrounding him, but the food alone, this is stuff that wouldn't be kosher for a Jewish kid to eat. Pork and certain kinds of meat, and it's all there before him. And if there's ever a time to compromise, right, it's like, who's going to know, who's going to care? Everything's been taken away from me. In fact, that's really the thing. All the excuses that Daniel could have had, the things he could have said. He could have just been flat out bitter, right? He could have said, man, they've taken my manhood. They've taken everything from me. I'm going to enjoy myself a little bit of meat. I'm going to enjoy a little me time, right? But he doesn't do that. He does not do that. He consecrates himself to God. Now, the first word I want to look at is in verse 8. It's the word purpose. But before I do that, consider what Daniel is doing. He is taking a stand that most anybody else is not taking. He is standing alone against the culture, against the tide, against his own countrymen. And a lot of people, no doubt, thought, hey, man, Daniel, turn it down, man. Don't be so cranked up on something so stupid like this. Just sit down and eat the food, right? But Daniel was committed, and he knew he was not going to do that. And so we could say you're making a mountain out of a molehill. But I don't think Daniel's doing that. I think, as we're going to see today, he's being faithful in little things. Things that we could say, it's not a big deal, man. Just ease up. Just compromise a little bit. Daniel says, no way. In fact, how interesting that the original sin in the Garden of Eden started and was based around food that was consumed, right? And so is it a small thing that what we consume, and is that a big deal or not? For most people it wasn't, but for Daniel he knew something innately, that there are some things that God does not want me a part of, and this is it. And Daniel knew that. Which brings up the first word in verse 8, Daniel purposed in his heart, purposed. Another way to say that, an extrapolation, but certainly it's applicable, is he committed to himself. He was committed to this, to God. And I say that because look it up on your phone. I don't know if you use ChatGPT now. I call it Chat BLT, but that's just me. I don't know if you use that or if you still use Google, but just ask Google, ask Chat BLT. I get it all messed up all the time. Ask bacon, lettuce, tomato. Okay, you ask it and you say, hey, do people struggle with commitment to today's society? Just have fun with that. Just go down that rabbit hole for a minute. And the truth is, I think we all realize and know this, the world that we live in today hates commitment. I mean, on every level, hates commitment. You could argue that there's certain areas that people might be more prone to commitment to, but at the end of the day, people are just about sick of commitment in every area. I could give you a bunch of examples. Just think about it at work. I'll apply it to church because it's relevant for you and I. But just think about it at work. It is amazing that employees won't commit to something. In fact, that's the way we have to hire employees nowadays, is giving them like a bunch of options. And then really creative bosses and stuff, they'll guide their people into thinking a certain way as if they're making the choice to not have actually made a commitment. So without being more vague, let me say it like this, like at church. Just hear this, take this with a grain of salt. And I'm not even referring so much at our church, just in general. It is amazing when you ask someone to sign up and commit to serving the Lord in a particular area. I don't even have one in mind. But you ask them to serve in a particular way, and they're like, I can't do that. I can't commit to that. But here's what's funny. It's trippy, man. If you ask that same person, whether it's weekly, monthly, let's call it weekly. If you ask that person every week to do that job, they'll do it faithfully. But they won't commit to it. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's the strangest thing. It's like, will you lead this? Absolutely not. Don't have the time, can't commit to it. All right, well, will you do it this week? Oh, yeah. Next week? Yeah. Next week? Yeah. So you'll always do it. You won't want to commit to it. Does that blow your mind, or is that just me? It's just me. Thank you, Vicky, so much. It just blows my mind. Why won't you commit to it, man? Let alone, imagine committing to people. And I've had the privilege of doing many weddings at this point in my life. And that's one thing, I'm so blown away by, but you got people standing on the altar confessing how they're going to commit to each other, and then like 4, 3, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 years later, like, never mind. I commit to you for my life, but what I really mean is like as long as I like it, as long as things are going my way, and then we'll be done. But again, I always notice this, no one ever says that on their wedding day, do they? I'm with you for a while, just don't cross me, you know what I mean? Everything will be cool. Have you ever heard that at a wedding? All right, neither have I. And if you do, that's one of those weird ones. You probably leave, right? That's strange. But I say that seriously, friends. We are suffering in the world today from a lack of commitment. And if we want to do anything profound, and I promise to tie this in the end, we've got to be committed to certain things. We've got to be committed to certain things. Just hold the course, hand on the plow. Even the Lord said, a man that takes his hand on the plow and looks back, he's not worthy of the kingdom. Plow ahead, get moving, go forward, don't stop. Be committed. But Daniel purposed, and I just say that now because I think this is the great strength behind Daniel, is the commitment, what he was going to do. And it's an elliptical word, by the way, which means it was always going to be that result. Always going to be that result. I can think of two applications. One is a man named Shammah, who was one of David's mighty men, if you remember. He fought over a little pea patch of ground. And everyone else had fled. Everyone else ran away. And Shammah said, not me. I will stand this ground. And he would rather die trying than to not do it at all. And that's one of those things. A great definition, by the way, of commitment goes like this. Commitment means doing what you said long after the mood you said it in has passed. That's the thing. When we lose the mood or the excitement or the passion, we're like, not so much anymore. But commitment is doing the thing you said you would do long after the mood you said it in has passed. And Shammah was like, this is my pea patch. I'm not going anywhere. I will die defending it. And he has victory. Commitment. Another one, speaking of the early church, Acts chapter 2, it's a famous verse. Acts chapter 2, verse 42 says this. Speaking of the early church, after some believers were added to the fellowship there, it says they continued, here it is, steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine, or like Bible study, fellowship, breaking of bread and prayers. They were committed to what we would call today, just simply put, church. They were committed to being with one another just like this, right here, right now. And the word steadfastly, it's just that. It's a commitment. It's a commitment, and it's an unwavering commitment. It's not like if I feel like it, if I don't have other things, this is what we're going to do. And look at the early church. I find that fascinating because I've heard it so many times throughout my Christian experience. People say, if we could just go back to the early church and be like the early church, wouldn't that be awesome? And I'm like, first of all, if you know the book of Acts, like it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? It's like people are dying and gossip and bitter infighting and backbiting. The whole reason we have deacons in the church is because of a big quarrel between Greeks and Jews. It's not pretty. So if we want to be like the early church, we're going to have warts and scrapes and cuts and all the rest of it. But the thing about them was they were committed. That's the key thing that we'd want to be like the early church. Now anyway, there we have it. He purposed in his heart, he would not defile himself. So this is not just like I'm non-GMO and it doesn't sit well with my gut. It's like this is a defilement of my spirituality. He knew that. He acknowledged that. And so, interesting, the eunuch, the chief eunuch, says to him, I fear my lord the king. There is an element in here of fear. Obviously, we've seen that last week. We see it this week. Controlling these guys through fear. And there is a reality, if this guy doesn't deliver these men, like the cream of the crop, he says, I fear my own head. He'll cut my head off. So I'm not playing games here. Now, so here's what he did. He says to Daniel, I'm sorry, man, you just got to eat the food. So we don't even know what his other friends and other people thought, but the chief eunuch himself said, you can't do it. I'm sorry, man. My life is on the line. You got to eat the food. Sorry, bro. So it says in verse 11, Daniel said, oh yeah, sorry, I even asked. I'm so ashamed of myself. No, he doesn't say that, does he? Look at it. Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, in verse 12, please test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink, and then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies. And as you see fit, so deal with your servants. So he consented in verse 14 with them in the matter, and tested them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh. Now, that's interesting. All the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies, thus in verse 16, the steward took away their portion of delicacies and the wine which they were drinking and gave them vegetables. And so these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom. And so Daniel had understanding in all his visions and dreams. Now this is supernatural, friends, right? You got guys that are eating meat and pork to the full versus some guys that are eating salads. It's not a natural thing because, again, people like to do the Daniel diet and Ezekiel diet. This isn't like a way of living that's going to make you necessarily healthier in a sense, but it's just to simply say this is a supernatural occurrence that somehow Daniel was superior, right? You remember a couple of years ago, I just love how things go in waves. You remember how a few years ago pea protein was like the way to go? Like, we got to get away from all that nasty animal protein. We got to get down to like vegetable and pea protein. And then a couple years later, they're like, actually, it's not as good. We need to go back to animal protein. You remember? I'm like, thank God, because I'm way on the animal protein train, right? I'm on that one way better. But it's amazing how things go like that. But this isn't like some good choice of diet. This is a supernatural thing where God gives them more strength and more health despite their offset. Now, let me just say something about Daniel and this guy and his friends here. Can we just acknowledge for a moment that there would be we call it the flesh or your natural desire would want to eat that food, right? Here's your choice. You can eat, the king's cupcakes and steaks and burgers and fries, or you can eat water and nasty vegetables. Your choice. Like, who would ever opt for that? But Daniel sees what is out there. And again, the biggest thing, and the reason for defilement, is because this food has been offered to pagan gods. And for Daniel to consume that, it was a sense of allegiance. That's why they were eating at the buffet. They were eating in allegiance to all these foreign gods. And so Daniel said, I'm not eating at that buffet. I'm not eating anything off their delicacies. I'm not drinking any of the wine. I will take water and a side of vegetables wherever we can get it. And he chose that for himself. Because again, I just want to point out, there would be a natural desire for that food, any one of us, to eat that food instead. But again, going back to that, I kind of made a little joke there. It wasn't funny, actually, was it? When I said, oh yeah, never mind, like, sorry I'm making a hassle. No, he hears no, and does he cave and say, oh, well, I tried? Because how many of us would have said that? Well, before God, I tried, and they said no. Listen, here's a word that every Christian needs. Commitment. Here's a second one. Perseverance. Persevere. Keep going, even when it's difficult. Every one of us need to hear that. Keep going. Persevere through it. Now, I'll give you a biblical example of that. In fact, it's right here in the book of Acts. But perseverance is necessary. He doesn't take no for an answer. There's a pattern in the book of Acts that Paul uses and has great success with it. You ready? It goes like this. 4 P's. He preaches the word. He experiences persecution. He perseveres. And then he produces fruit. It's the persevering part that's hard for all of us, isn't it? It's the persevering through all the difficulties and all the things that come against us to keep going no matter what. That's the difficult thing for sure. But Daniel doesn't take no and say, well, I tried. Daniel says, okay, there's got to be a window here somewhere. The door's closed, where's the window? And he keeps going forward. And because of that, he's given a chance. And with that, the Lord blesses that supernaturally. Now, last week, I read a story about a lady that worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and it was her job. You guys, I left you on the cliffhanger. Remember that? And her job was quality inspection, and she found that there was a contamination. And so this massive batch of syringes was compromised. And so therefore, she reported that, and all of her higher-ups, all the way up to the owner of the company, said, absolutely not. You will not report this. We're going to roll these syringes out no matter what. Because they, quote-unquote, saw it as a cost-effectiveness. Well, the reality was they were going to get rid of contaminated needles, syringes, I mean. And so, at any rate, the story goes on, by the way. She, in fact, does not recant, and so they take her job. They fire her. But because of the delay until they could get the new inspector in, the companies are interested in what's going on. They do a deep investigation and find out why. It's because this lady was faithful to stop them from getting rid of these contaminated syringes. So the company that was going to receive them all went and found her, hired her, and paid her even more money than she was making before. That's pretty cool, right? But the point is that she was staying up late at night for 3 nights over the weekend wondering what she was going to do to be honoring to God and being faithful to her job, even though her own boss was telling her not to be faithful. Now, it doesn't always play out that way. We know this, right? But in that woman's case, and I think it's just like Daniel here, it's such a wonderful reality that it's amazing how God will work. And that's why we gotta be persistent. We got to just trust God to do something great beyond ourselves. But we do our part. We do the faithful part. Now, verse 18. It says, at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king, in verse 19, interviewed them. And among them all, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And therefore they served before the king, and in all matters of wisdom and understanding, about which the king examined them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers who were in his realm. And thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. That is to say, Daniel literally lived through all of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom and into the Persian Empire. And Daniel would stay in that position of authority through multiple empires. That's how God used Daniel in his commitment and faithfulness and perseverance. Now, so many things to look at before we finish today officially. But it's interesting that the king interviews all of his new students. And he says to himself, those 4 Hebrew boys, they're the cream. They're the ones that we want. They're the best of the best. And that's why it says that they were serving in verse 19 before the king. They were the ones exclusively invited to the inmost part of the king's leadership. And it's an amazing influence that they get to have. But I'm going to take the opportunity for all of us, but particularly for our young folks. I really think about the generation that's coming up and the desire for greatness, to be great, right? And just so we know, the biblical definition of that, by the way, is the Lord himself said, if you want to be great in the kingdom, you must be the servant of all. So that's true greatness, by the way. Just serve other people, and that's how you become great, realistically. But there's some things in here, like the book of Hebrews tells us, these things are in here for our admonition, that we would learn from them. We would see a character like Daniel and take a lesson or 2 or more from Daniel. And so, for our young folks, listen, the question is kind of like, how do I become great? Or how do I go on to do great things? And I know there's a lot of pressure on young people. I mean, it's so sad. Like a kid's like in a freshman year and like, what are you going to do after you graduate? And they're like stressed about, I don't know. I'm still 11 years old, or whatever. Like they're just stressed out. But the thing is, there's this pressure on being great, doing something great. How do we do that? And I suppose it would just be this. Take little things seriously, right? Take small responsibilities seriously. Take commitment seriously. Again, we all want to do the great, big, massive thing that everyone's going to look at and say, wow, that person's awesome. But we don't want the process in which it takes to get there, right? We just want to do something big and grandiose. We want to do what the phenomenal thing is. And by the way, if you do a study on phenomenons, like Michael Jackson and these people that have like a phenomenal amount of success that's way outside of the normal course of success, you take a phenomenon. People like Michael Jackson were super depressed because they were rocket launched into the atmosphere of success without the massive journey to get there. And they struggle with identity and imposter syndrome and worth and value, because here's what happens a lot of times. They get to that high level of success, but they can't maintain it. They don't know how to have a number 1 hit, another massive success. And so they're stuck forever in that place. And Michael Jackson was a victim of that for sure. We could go on and on. But the point is, the way to success and greatness is not just bypassing all the small stuff. It is for sure going through all of the small details to ultimately get there. That's the best way to do it. And so it's being faithful in little things. So put it like this. Don't put it off. Do the little thing. Be ready to go at any time. Because here's the reality. At any moment, this is a truth statement for every one of us, your life and mine could be so different in a moment. Think about it like this. One phone call, one meeting, one opportunity, one tragedy, boom, everything's different. Like overnight. But if that thing were to come to you right now, are you ready for it? Have you been preparing for it? Are you training for it? As if it were, if that moment were to meet you, are you truly ready for it in your life? I mean that seriously. Like, there are no athletes that you see in the Olympics that are just like, yeah, a week ago I was just like a couch surfer, dude. I never even worked out, man. I just kind of got up and said, I can do this. Do you see what I'm saying? How many years and decades of dedication do people put into something to be great at it? And we want to get off the couch and be great. No, are you prepared right now? Are you ready right now for that phone call? For that opportunity? That thing to come your way? Or are you just who you are? You're not even trying. You're not even applying yourself. Again, being faithful in the little things. Because here's the deal. This is what Satan does. This is what he whispers to every one of us. Satan does not whisper never. He just whispers to us, not now. Not now. Here's what I mean. If you hear never, it's discouraging and it's too much. But what Satan is crafty at is not now. Not never, just not now. So put it off. I'll give you an example. I'm going to really throw down and serve God with my life when I get through high school. Okay? Well, high school comes and goes, and I didn't expect all this. So maybe when I get through college, maybe when I have kids, maybe after I have kids, once the kids are graduated, once I get through retirement. You see how that works? It's not never. It's not that I'll never serve God. It's just not now. I'm just not going to serve God right now. I got a lot of things I got to do first before I fully commit to God. So I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. And next thing you know, you're on your deathbed realizing I never did any of it. Because I didn't say I would never do it. I just said not now. I'll eventually do it. And that's the tragedy. That's the danger for every one of us. In that journey of being great or doing something great is putting it off, putting it off, putting it off, putting it off. And then eventually someday, and then you never get there. You're never ready for it. Well, here's the thing about Daniel. Again, gleaning from all this. The fact that the king calls him in and he's there and his assessment is these guys are incredible. They're ready to go. They're the top of the top 1% kind of thing. Well, for them, for Daniel, you ready for this? It was not just information, it was application. Daniel was not just worried about information, he was worried about application. See what he did with his life? He lived out something, a commitment to God, and that was the application to what he knew. So listen, it's so important for you and I because you and I live in the information age, but that doesn't make people smart, right? In fact, it's making us dumber, if I'm being honest. Look at me, I'm saying the same thing. It makes us dumb. Because we have a lot of information we take for granted, and we think, oh, it's all right there at our fingertips. But information does not make a person wise. In fact, here's a saying I heard recently I absolutely loved. Most people are addicted to education, but they are allergic to execution. They're addicted to education, but they're allergic to execution. What I mean is you can read all the books in the world and never do anything about it. You can read the Bible every day of your life and never do anything about it. In fact, for me, the best thing I ever heard was, I think it was Charles Spurgeon that talked about devotions, and he said you read something until it bites you. You read until the Bible bites you, and then you do something about it. I mean, if you go through the Bible, and I commend that practice, I know people that do that, it's wonderful that you make your way through the Bible, but are you actually applying it? Are you just reading 8 chapters a day, or are you finding something in there that I can do today and applying that? Because there's a danger in just only information. Another way to say that is like, it's not another book, right? I mean, people have joked with me that at some point, in different reasons, I should write a book. I don't know why. It's strange that more than one person would ever say that to me, quite frankly. Greg, you should write a book. I'm like, about what? What in the world? What would I write a book about? And then here's what I say. If I wrote a book, how many people have already written a book on that topic? I would be assuming I have something new and good to say. And I'm just here before you to say, I can't think of anything. Anything that I could say, I could find a book that's written 10 times better than I could ever write it. I don't think we need another book, is what I'm saying. Don't ever hold me to this if I write a book for some reason. I don't know. I don't know why. It's just in the back of my mind. It's like, when I first said that years ago, and then these opportunities, I'm like, I could write a book. I'm not going to do it. Anyway. But it's not about another book. Listen, we are inundated with the information. We don't even need books. You got YouTube, right? Type in your problem, what you're looking for, YouTube it. You got it. Done. ChatGPT, BLT, right? It's not information. It's application. And so just think about it like another book, and just like marriage, for example. Marriage, godly living, husband, wife, man, woman. So often we put so much emphasis on just another book, a little more information. So how many, wives, it's playoffs right now for the football, right? I lost track of it all, and then I just caught wind that the Patriots are doing good, and I'm back, baby. I'm a Patriots fan again. Woo! Anyway, so today's like playoffs, right? And so a wife somewhere is going to be thinking to herself, I got this awesome new book on marriage that my husband should read. But I don't want to just come out and ask him. So what I'll do is I'll place it on the coffee table. And while the Patriots are playing, he'll look. Now she's thinking he'll look and see the book and say, oh, I need to read this. And he'll shut the game off and watch that. No, he's going to use that as a coaster for his coffee, right? Or his seltzer water, right? Whatever. Hopefully you're not drinking anything other than that, right? But that's what's going to happen. But here's the deal. It's not about another book. It's about applying what you know. Again, next Sunday, my pastor, spiritual father, will be here next week teaching on marriage, a biblical foundation, and then on Thursday night, he'll be teaching about the fruit of a biblical marriage. Don't want to miss those. But you know what he said to me recently about what they're doing at church right now? He said, we are paring everything back. We're cutting all the extra programs, all the extra things, all the small studies, all of this, that. He said, what we want is people to actually just do the things the Bible tells us to do. Think about it. And nowadays in the world of church, there's this sense that we've got to have something for everybody at every level, everywhere. Am I right? Every age group. Your demographic has its own unique Bible study. Whatever happened to just this right here? We all sit in here and we hear the Word of God and we go and do something about it. But no, if you're young, if you're a person with one leg ministry, we got every kind of ministry out there. It's unbelievable. There's a ministry for everybody. There's a Bible for everybody, right? Hunter's Bible, Cook's Bible. Like what happened to the regular Bible, right? It is truly amazing. But he said to me, we're paring back. And so for example, instead of getting the guys together or the husbands together or the men together, he's saying, we're just going to encourage them to be good husbands at home and take all the stuff you know and learn and apply it at home. I said, that's phenomenal. It's amazing because it's not information, it's application. Go do the thing you know you're supposed to do. And not another book, not more information. It's just application. Just do what you know to be right. Isn't it phenomenal? Again, the topic of marriage in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, is so small. So very few verses for it. And we act like we need a book, we need a seminar, we need more. But in reality, there's enough there for a lifetime to live out, isn't there? There's enough in the Bible to say, wow, if I tried to love my wife like Christ loved the church, I could never stop trying to do that the rest of my life. Right? Do I need a book? No, I don't need another book to tell me how to do it. I just need to do that. And let the Holy Spirit lead me and be a man of prayer that commits myself to God and does what He asked me to do according to His Word. So not more information, application. Do what you know to be true. And so with that, I'll just leave you with two last things. And wow, we're going to be done significantly early today, which I don't think anyone's upset about, right? And some of you are thinking, you owe me. So I know I do. Okay, here it is. Another secret to Daniel's success. We don't see it this week. We'll see it in weeks to come. He's a man of prayer. He's a man of prayer. When heavy news comes his way, he commits it to prayer. The moment someone knocks on his door and they're like, hey, Daniel, I need to see you. And he says, about what? Everyone that's in your cohort of wise men, we're going to kill you all. Well, oh. He's like, that's heavy. Just give me a minute. And he wants to pray about it. He wants to meet with the king and then pray. So Daniel is a man of prayer, and I think that's fascinating. And again, speaking of application, can I just put that forward to you this morning? How often do we run to God in prayer? In fact, I heard a long time ago, how quickly we run to God in prayer shows how dependent we are upon Him. And why is it that it's a last resort? Listen, it is shameful for every one of us to look at prayer and reaching out to God as a last resort. It is shameful. That should be like a Daniel thing, the first resort. Wow, this is overwhelming. Wow, this is heavy. Wow, I don't know how to handle this. I'm going to pray about that. But we do all sorts of research. We read books. We ask people. We go to everywhere and everything except for the Lord and His throne and the peace and the understanding that we could get from that. But Daniel was a man of prayer. Just take note of that. Now, and here's the last thing. There is someone of much greater caliber than Daniel, a man much more moral and much better than Daniel. It's me. No, I'm just kidding. I was just seeing if you're paying attention. No, it's not me at all. I just had to do that to you. It is because Daniel's not our hero. Daniel's not the hero of the Bible. The Lord Jesus Christ is the hero of the Bible. And Daniel would prophesy of the Messiah to come with awe and reverence. So remember this, as amazing as Daniel is, and as dialed in as we could look at Daniel and consider his life, the Lord Jesus Christ is the thing that Daniel was setting his eyes on and saying, these are the kinds of things that I'm living for, that He's sending a promised Messiah to us. And He was just giving him more and more revelation, but not full revelation. We have the full revelation of the Messiah. Can you imagine? We have Daniel's account, all the prophets, the New Testament, the Gospels, the Lord's ministry. The book of Revelation, we have it all. And we get to look back with full and perfect understanding and clarity. And so I remind you of that. The hero of the book of Daniel, the hero of the Bible is not Daniel, it's the Lord Jesus Christ. So I say this to every one of us this morning. Listen, we need to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. We need to have it. And that personal relationship is just that. It is a personal relationship. Any good relationship, you spend time with someone, right? You have good conversation with them. You talk to them. You meet with them. That kind of stuff, right? If we're not spending any time with God, what kind of relationship do we have with Him? Not one to speak of. Passing at best. But listen, we all need that personal relationship with Jesus Christ. All of us. And I hope, I just assume and hope for every one of us you already have that. If you don't, I want you to consider that this morning. Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Because what's on the line? Separation from God. Anyone, the Lord Himself would say, no man comes to the Father except through me. Nobody. So if you and I don't have a personal relationship with God, when we get to heaven, we're not going to tell Him, hey, I was a pretty good person. I did a lot of nice things for people. He's going to say that doesn't count. It's not good enough. You were still tainted with sin. What have you done with your sin? Well, I tried to be a good person. That's not good enough. See, Jesus Christ came down to die in our place, right? And He gave His righteousness to us. So He's the hero. And He's the one we say, I put my faith and trust in Him alone. So I remind you of that this morning. It's not Daniel and meditating on Daniel's life. It's knowing that our Savior is Jesus Christ and surrendering to Him.